Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, you can call me Evie, and I wanted to tell you my story because it was absolutely terrifying at that time. It all started in the morning of February 14, 2018. I was in middle school and the campus was buzzing with life. And guys were running around with gifts for their girlfriends. Girlfriends gave gifts to their boyfriends, and friends exchanged candies. All in all, everything seemed normal. I wasn't popular per se, but I knew everyone and everyone knew me. But I preferred to hang out with a small group of close friends because being around too much people made me anxious. During lunch, I was hanging around my usual group of friends, which consisted of 2 girls, Alex and Mia, and 3 guys, Nico, Adrian, and Elijah. Valentine's Day of all days made me even more anxious because a lot of people would join our group because my friend Adrian attracted a lot of girls, and my friend Mia was such a sweetheart and a lot of guys wanted to date her. I began to feel overwhelmed, so I slipped out of my group and then headed to a secret hiding place, which was just a bench that was way out in the field, sort of hidden by some trees. No one really went there, so it was a good place to catch my breath. And as I was reading my book, I hear someone getting closer, and I look up to see this guy Emmanuel. When I saw Emmanuel, I instantly started to freak out because he always seemed to have this sort of infatuation with me. Every day, he would force himself on me, randomly hugging me, trying to kiss me, telling me he liked me. And believe it or not, I would often see him around my neighborhood, and he didn't even live near there. I decided to play it cool and then continued reading, when he suddenly just grabs my book out of my hands. "Hey, what the heck, man?" I yelled, and he simply responded with, "Sorry, I just wanted your attention." I was still angry, but I tried to calm myself down. "What do you want?" I said. "I really like you, and I want you to be my girlfriend. I swear, I'll treat you like a queen." After he said that, he handed me a box of chocolates and a cute stuffed bear. I thought it was a nice gesture, but I really felt uncomfortable whenever he was around, so I told him that even though it was sweet of him, I was already in a relationship, which wasn't true. When the words left my mouth, he turned from being nice and calm to angry. He yelled at me saying, "How dare I date someone that wasn't him?" I tried to get up and leave, but he tightly grabbed my arm and forcefully kissed me. I tried pushing him off, but he was stronger than me, so I yelled for help at the top of my lungs, and he quickly covered my mouth. So I bit his hand and I kicked him in the balls. And while he was shocked, I broke free and ran to my friend group. He yelled behind me saying how he would rape me and then kill me. Obviously, the duty guards heard this and immediately took action. But I just wanted to get to the safety of my group, so I kept running until I bumped into Adrian. The rest of my group had separated in order to look for me when they noticed that I was absent. I hugged him and I cried my eyes out. He only comforted me until I was ready to talk. I then told him everything when I was suddenly called into the principal's office. They wanted to know everything that had happened, and then the police were called. It was a long day, and I just wanted to go home. After I told them what had happened, I was allowed to leave for home early. I later found out that in his house, There was a shrine built for me with pictures of me doing various different things, walking my dog, eating in my living room with my family, even of me changing. It was horrible and traumatizing. So Emmanuel, let's never meet again.
This happened to my friend Simone a while back. She got into a relationship with a guy who she adored. He constantly doted on her. He had money and came from a line of it, but that didn't make their relationship any more stable. After the honeymoon period of about 3 months, things start to go off the rails. She couldn't come hang out with the girls anymore. There was always an excuse. She was always busy. We would often go to the movies together, just us two, but even these would be cancelled, and I was her best friend. She started telling me that she didn't want to speak to me that much anymore, that her boyfriend was consuming a lot of her time. Non-stop texts, asking where she was when she was at school. It became really infuriating. She even had to quit her job as a nanny of these 2 adorable children because the guy became concerned that she may just fall in love and sleep with the husband. Really messed up stuff. After a while, I actually went round her house and spoke to her mum about it. I felt like it was the best thing to do. She wasn't in a good place. And after a good chat and staying over for dinner, crying and falling asleep together on her bed, we agree that the best course of action would be to tear off the band-aid and let this guy go. It took her about a month, but she dumped him. She finally saw how manipulative he was being and how it's not normal to try and control your partner's life. But then the stalking began. He started sending her gifts, all of which she refused. Then, following her. She got a new job working at a supermarket. She'd be followed home in her car by her ex. When she got home, he'd usually just drive on, and she began to get really annoyed. She had ceased contact with him about 3 months ago at this point, and she started messaging him again, demanding why he was still following her, that they were broken up, and that he should just get over it. He said that he still loved her, and that he would not relent until they were together again. He didn't stop saying this, and said that he needed to make sure she got home safely. It was his number one concern because he loved her, that she was his soulmate. As you can imagine, this went down really well. So well, in fact, she ended up getting a restraining order, which didn't do much until they tried to get further police involvement. At which point, he finally got the memo that perhaps it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. And that's how the story ended. But it was a very challenging year. Thankfully, Simone is now with a lovely guy.
I'm 19 years old and I'm living far from home in a studio room. I'm often up late, and last week I was just doing some laundry at around 11 p.m. I saw a man sitting in the lobby. I saw him around a bit at night, but I didn't think much of it. I'm in the laundry room and I just put my clothes in the dryer, and I hear the laundry room door beeping, and it meant that someone was coming in. There was the man, standing there with no clothes to wash, just staring at me. I maneuvered around him and headed to the lifts, and he followed me quickly and cornered me and asked for my Snapchat. I was tired, and I just wanted to get back to my room, so I stupidly gave it to him. I figured that he would message and try to flirt, and that I could just say, "I have a boyfriend. Sorry if you thought this was anything else." And that would be the end of it. I'm about 5'4", very long red hair, and I'm half Indian/English with Afghanistan descent, so I'm white passing, but kind of exotic. But people tend to stare at me. Well, anyway, He starts messaging me, and it's kind of normal. But then he starts saying weird stuff like, "I saw you a month ago and I was impressed. I've been visiting a friend and staying here. And also, I've been watching you. I noticed that you come out mostly at night." And he told me that he was Saudi Arabian and only visiting for 5 more days. But then it gets worse. He says, "I love you. I can't help it." And then I say that I have a boyfriend. And then he answers, "I only want you," and continues to completely ignore that. He asked to come to my room and I said no, and that he wanted a hug. He asked me if I was living alone and if I was a virgin, and he kept saying he loved me and that I was perfect for him and that I impressed him. At that point, I recorded all the messages on Snapchat, spoke to him a little bit more to gather evidence so that I could take it to reception in the morning and tell them that he's been watching me for a month. I got my guy friend who lives on the 2nd floor to walk me down to the laundry room, and we sat in the student lounge area, and my friend calmed me down. I was shaking with adrenaline and fear. We saw him around the laundry room again looking for me, but luckily, I'd already picked it up. I run back to my room and my friend says that I can't stay in his room. But I said it's okay and that I'll just lock my door. It's about 1 a.m. and I hear someone outside my room trying to get in. I asked my friend if he's outside my room and he said no, so I just froze. I didn't want to make a sound and I felt sick to my stomach and helpless. Eventually, it stopped and whoever it was went away. And in the morning, I reported this to reception and then went to stay a few days with my boyfriend. Then after went to London to visit a friend. And last night was the first time that I'd spent the night in my room since this happened. I'm very paranoid now. Sadly, I should probably be used to this. It's not the first time that I've been sexually harassed. One guy tried to kiss me in a club by grabbing my head, and a bunch of other things have happened, but I won't go into there. But anyway, I'm terrified to go outside my room after dark now. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder and feeling paranoid. I just keep blaming myself for being too nice, and I know it's my long thick hair that attracts people's eyes to me. I just want to cut it all off. Has anyone else had a similar experience? How did you deal with it? Reception still hasn't updated me on if he is still in the building. To start, I'm a female in my early 20s and I work as a cashier at a grocery store. I talk to hundreds of people a week, and I should have known something was off when you first came through my line about 6 months ago. But my job is to be friendly to people, so I treated him like every other customer. He was obviously down on his luck, and when I asked the usual question of, "How is it going today?" he proceeded to tell me a whole sob story. His wife, or possibly ex, had apparently kicked him out of the house. In his words, apparently because she was having a psychotic breakdown. Which should have been my first red flag. He was houseless, lonely, and hungry, and I felt bad for him and I attempted to sympathize. He was trying to buy a hot roasted chicken, but our government programs in the state don't cover hot food for some reason. So I did some cashier magic and I changed it so his food stamps would cover the chicken and he'd have a hot meal that night. Well, this was my first mistake, and although he was extremely grateful, this was also apparently a defining moment for him. Every Monday, he proceeded to come through my line and buy a hot chicken. I genuinely thought I was just doing something nice for someone that's going through a hard time. He always ended up trapping me at my register with conversation. and at first it was to complain about his ex's psychotic behavior. He called her names like narcissistic and crazy, and I listened because I had nowhere to go and I was at work after all. But after a while he got over it and he moved into a hostel of some sorts. He was somewhat more stable, but also obviously depressed. He always told me that I cheered him up and he enjoyed talking with me, and I told him that I did as well. Maybe that wasn't the right thing to say, but I really did at that time. He would also occasionally ask what my shift was or when I got off work, but I was too naive at that time to see the harm in the question. Eventually, he was very excited to tell me that he got a hold of a used keyboard and was excited to be playing or writing music again. I told him that was awesome and that I also play the piano. Well, something must have clicked in his brain because now he had something to relate to me about, and every conversation we had from there on was him encouraging me to play the piano again and telling me that I'd be a great music teacher, even though he'd never heard or seen me play. But I just nodded and smiled and did my job, and I really thought that conversation topic was innocent enough. Then one day he asked for my email. This is where I really messed up. Even though it was a burner email and I never planned on responding, I gave it to him. He was sending me music he liked and music he wrote, and I never responded to him. I knew it was upsetting him, but at this point, something felt weird, and responding would have been opening another line of communication with him, and I kind of had my fill at work already. At some point, he also asked for my number, but I declined giving it to him. He said that he finally wanted to have a real conversation with me, even after never responding to his emails once. I should mention too that my co-workers always thought that the interactions he had with me were a little too personal and lengthy. Someone even called him a creep one day, but I brushed it off. I was just being friendly to someone who was down on their luck, so I thought. Eventually, everything my co-workers were saying were starting to ring loudly in my head. I found myself avoiding him. He was sending me emails at least once a week and I never replied. I knew he'd come in on Mondays and about what time, so I'd take an extra break then. I just didn't want to see him anymore. I didn't want to talk, and to be frank, he was creeping me out a bit. Last week, one of the busiest weeks at the grocery store. It was the week before Thanksgiving. I couldn't avoid him, and he came through my line. He only bought a bag of chips and very clearly just wanted to talk to me and waited in line for 5 minutes instead of going through the express registers. I gave him short answers and tried not to engage too much, and he told me that I had saved his life and had somehow helped him completely turn it around just by being his cashier at the grocery store. This is something he has said before, but this time he told me that he had wrote a song for me to return the favor. I didn't know how to react, but in that moment, I said I'd let him know what I think. I think I saw it in my email, but I never gave it a listen, and I never even read the email. This interaction made me feel icky. It told me everything that I needed to know. He was thinking of me after he left the store. He was thinking of me while he was home. He was thinking about me while writing music, and the only thoughts I were having about him were on Mondays, because I knew he'd be coming in. My thoughts about him were filled with dread and anxiety, and today was absolutely my breaking point. I got back from my last break and I just saw him getting off the bus. At this point, my co-workers know that I try to avoid him, so I ran up the stairs to the break room and I was obviously panicking. 15 minutes later, one of my coworkers come in and lets me know that he did 3 laps around the store just looking for me and then left without buying anything. He was clearly seeking me out. I told her that I was gonna wait 10 more minutes and I would be back on the floor. So I did. But when I got back to the floor, I was just filled with anxiety and clearly looking around for him. Thank God my coworkers had my back because I didn't notice him coming in again. But he suddenly beelined to my register and I started having a panic attack. One of the other cashiers was very inviting to him. She said, "I can help you right over here." Because at this point, I was running away from the registers and the other cashier had stepped into where I was at. He ignored her and followed me. And I didn't say anything. I was also clearly panicking and running away, and he followed me to the steps yelling, "Wait! I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I had just made it to the break room and the store manager opened the door. I just had a conversation with him about this guy, and he told me that he would handle it the next time he was in, and he will tell him that he needs to leave me alone. I didn't realize it would be in the same day. I blurted out, "He's back. He's following me." Management ran down the stairs to try to catch him. He was gone. He still didn't buy anything because he only does this if I'm the cashier. I had a full-blown panic attack in the break room and I was crying and I called my boyfriend to come pick me up because I didn't want to be alone. His apologies rang in my ears and one of my coworkers pointed out, he wouldn't be apologizing if he knew he wasn't doing something wrong. That really stung. She was 100% right. My coworkers comforted me, and they told me that it wasn't my fault and that I don't need to be sorry. I just can't help but feel so sorry. Sorry I didn't have the guts to set boundaries with him sooner or tell him how uncomfortable he was making me. The store manager said that his behavior was completely inappropriate. Coming once a week when he knew that I was working and only buying something if I was his cashier. He said that that was stalker behavior. Everyone did. I ended up going home early and calling out for the next day because I am genuinely scared of seeing him again this week. I am still in shock and complete disbelief, but old man, let's not meet again, especially not next Monday.
I work night shift at Walmart. My shifts are always from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., except in the first few months of the year when they're cutting back on hours, and I sometimes start at 11 p.m. and leave at 6 a.m. Late last year, around September, when the weather was still nice outside, I went into Walmart during the day to buy some groceries. I had a few things in my basket and was walking out from the back of the store towards the self-checkout area. I noticed, out of my peripherals, that a man, probably in his mid-20s, a little taller than me and wearing a baseball cap, was approaching me from the other side of the features, those promo displays that sit in the middle of the big aisles. When he was done, he started talking to me like we were acquaintances. "I see people I know here all the time when I'm here." "Oh?" I asked, assuming he'd seen me in the morning while I was working. "Yeah, it's weird how every time I come here I see the same people all the time." He kept rephrasing himself, and I didn't really know what to say. It was pretty awkward. He kept making small talk, as I didn't stop walking to the self-checkout, and was kind of just going along with the conversation like you do when some random person is talking about the weather. Now that I look back on it, when he told me he sees the same people all the time, I thought he looked a little familiar and assumed he was a vendor and worked some mornings there, and I mistakenly mentioned I worked there and also see the same faces. Then he told me to have a nice day and I checked out and went to my car, dismissing the interaction. A lot of fellow employees greet me at Walmart when I go there during the day. so I didn't think much of it. Then, it got super weird super fast. I was just leaving the parking lot, and the exiting road splits into a left-only lane and the other a straightaway. I was turning, stopped, when this white Ford Explorer pulls up next to me and beeps loudly. I was already turning, but looked in my rear view and sure enough it was the guy from earlier. I recognized his face and baseball cap. He sat at this stop, watching me pull away. Alright, a little weird, but he's probably just being friendly. When I got home, I told my boyfriend, and he immediately thought it was strange, and then said I was wrong for even engaging in conversation with this man, because sometimes some guys can get the wrong idea. My boyfriend also works with me on my shift, but his car has a blown head, so we've just been using my car to commute back and forth from work. So one nights I don't work, my car is still there if he works. Keep in mind that as employees, we aren't allowed to park close to the store. We are limiting the parking at the far end of the lot or in front of the other stores in the shopping center. I have a typical spot. I always park in front of the AT&T place, which is next to the gym, which is next to Walmart. About 2 months ago, my boyfriend said he went to walk out the car on break and saw a white Ford Explorer parked next to it, with a guy sitting within it. When he saw my boyfriend, he left. This happened again in the same month, except my boyfriend was sitting in the car, and the white Ford Explorer drove up to Walmart, then past my boyfriend staring at him. Then last month, I was driving home from work. It was barely 7 a.m., still pretty dark outside, and I was cruising down the highway towards the exit for my town. There was a car following 2 lengths behind me. We were both doing the speed limit, nothing abnormal, and suddenly this car begins to speed up, gets in the fast lane as if to pass me, but slows down so that we are neck and neck. The driver turns on his interior lights, waves at me and then speeds off. It was the guy in the white Ford Explorer. I just stared at him bewildered. I didn't know what to think. Then it dawned on me. He knows where I work. He knows what my car looks like. It's pretty distinguishable even from the back. I have sharp things along the top, decals, mud flaps, etc. He probably was waiting for me to leave work and then followed my car when I left. Thank God he didn't follow me home because I never would have realized it. I was totally unsuspecting when I walked out to my car alone. Now, what happened a few days ago is why I'm even sharing this. I think this is when it started to escalate. It was a typical night. Both my boyfriend and I worked along with our co-workers and friend called Mark. When Mark works, we always park next to him, so we can talk on lunch and breaks with the windows rolled down. Mark parks further away from the store, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. We finish up for the night, clock out, and Mark heads out to his car while my boyfriend and I buy some stuff to make for dinner. We check out and head to the car. Mark is still there, which is unusual for him since he books it out of there like a bat out of hell every time his shift is up. "Hey man, did you get my text?" he calls out, smoking a cigarette. "No, let me check my phone." My boyfriend pulls out his phone and I see a pretty long unread text from Mark. Pretty much, this weird guy came out of nowhere and was touching and looking at the inside of your girlfriend's car, Mark says. My immediate thought was, some randomer likes my car enough to come up and touch it. Weird but okay. Like he just walked up and started touching the fins and looking inside. Then when he saw me sitting there, he asked me about the decorations. I told him I didn't know anything about them, and he told me to have a nice day. We immediately started checking for damages, tires, etc., but there was nothing. We get in the car, and the 3 of us just sit there, contemplating the reasoning behind this. The Ford Explorer guy had almost slipped my mind. His encounters were a month or so apart, but then I started thinking about him again. There were 2 cars parked near us. A white 2010 Pontiac G6, and surely enough, a white Ford Explorer. Up until this point, I didn't know the make of the car he drove, but I knew it was definitely a white SUV. Mark said he came from the direction of those two cars, so unless he walked to Walmart at 7 a.m., one of those cars was his. The Explorer was facing the opposite direction, and I quickly wrote down the number plate. I started asking Mark what the guy looked like. About your boyfriend's height, kind of a gangster-looking guy. Keep in mind I've only seen this guy once when he wasn't in this car, which was 4 months prior. The height sounded right, but I didn't really know. We decided to sit there and wait until this guy came out and confront him. Just as we were about to give up and leave, the guy starts walking our way out of Walmart. He was wearing a black hoodie, dark jeans, and a camo bandana. When he saw us, he put on sunglasses. Both of us looked towards Mark. Is that the guy? No, that's not him. Mark shook his head. The guy walks into the Explorer, sits in the driver's seat and lights a cigarette with the door open. After he closed it, I looked back at Mark. Are you sure that's not him? Yeah, it's him. That's the guy, Mark nodded. Explorer guy starts his car and looped around our car, staring at us, then looped again to the exit of the parking lot. Mark said he didn't want to tell us it was the guy because he didn't want my boyfriend to lose his job. I'm pretty sure Mark would have told us if it was the guy, then some stuff would have gone down. I'm pretty positive now that this guy has been stalking me. For how long, I don't know. I'm starting to think the guy drove to Walmart. I want to assume to buy something since he walked out with nothing. Saw my car, parked next to it, then realized while he was casing my car that Mark was sitting there. So he asks Mark about the shark fins to try and make him think he was just interested in how it looked and not being completely shady. I'm creeped the hell out, but I have his plate number. The morning before we left work, my boyfriend bought me pepper spray, and I'm now parking elsewhere, and I'm going to start asking co-workers if they'll take me to my car in the mornings when I'm alone. I don't know what I can do, or if anyone would take this seriously because he hasn't tried anything yet. Sadly, I'm a pretty dainty girl, too brave for my own good, and I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag. But I don't think this is over yet. Last night I was stocking yogurt alone at around midnight, when I hear, "Excuse me," from behind me. Thinking it was a typical customer question, I turn around while politely replying, "Yes?" When I fully turned, it took me a moment to realize who was approaching me. Stalker. I know that my facial expression probably spoke volumes about my fear for a little while, but I didn't want to alarm or upset him, so I kept calm and spoke to him like I would any other customer. "I'm not a stalker or anything," he prefaced, "but I was just wondering where you got those decorations for your car. I see it a lot and I'm curious." "I got them off eBay." Before I could finish, he interrupted me, trying to keep the conversation going. "Do you know what they're called?" "Pretty sure they're called diffusers, because they're meant to diffuse airflow on the car. I got them off eBay for $20 the whole set." "Oh, okay, thanks. Have a nice night." He smiled and walked away. What the hell? I'm not a stalker or anything. Yeah, dude, you are. I think I was in shock because there was no way I should have been that calm and nonchalant while talking to him. I know for a fact he was just trying to cover his ass since we pretty much caught him red-handed that day. I really hope I never see him again because he knows we're on to him.
This happened to me when I was in my mid-20s. I was loving my life. I had my own place, a laid-back job, and I partied a lot and had my fair share of short-lived relationships. Sometimes, you just don't vibe with someone in a relationship like you thought you would, but you work just fine as friends. That was typically what happened to me. I kept telling myself that if the right person came along, I would be willing to give it a try, but I couldn't see myself with them long term. But it looked like my luck was changing after meeting a girl at a party I went to. I'll call her Alyssa. Alyssa was basically a friend of a friend. I went to a party and my friend immediately was pushing me to go talk to this girl. He said that she was currently in college studying psychology. She was a year younger than me, but loved partying and was at nearly every one they went to. She was quiet at first, but quickly loosened up to talking and playing some of the games they had set up. We were there pretty late, just drinking, playing games and hanging out. And I was starting to like it, and she seemed pretty cool, so I mentioned that we should actually go on a date sometime. Her reaction was different than what I normally get. She was ecstatic. I remember she hugged me and said she would love to. No one's ever that excited. And that same day, she had already started texting me and wanting to set up a time to see each other. We ended up going out sometime the same week, and just as I hoped, it was a fantastic time. I had learned a lot about her schooling, and that she was very passionate about it and what she wanted to do. I thought it was fantastic as I didn't go to college, and seeing someone dedicating so much time to it and still having fun was refreshing. And this started the longest 6 months of my life. Everything started great for probably the first 2 months or so. We went on normal dates, and we continued to go to parties together, and she started to practically live with me. I was fine with this as she was an incredible cook, and I ate out too much. She cleaned a lot, and it made me realize how much I didn't. And she was just all around a good person to be with. Our lives were a lot of normal though. We worked, she had school, we had dinner together, and she even met my mother at one point. We were like a normal couple, and it was a refreshing feeling. But little by little, things started changing. I think it was about 3, almost 4 months in, and she was starting her semester finals, so she was studying a lot. Her job also had 2 people quit, so she ended up working more, so she was definitely under more stress than usual. I tried to give her her own time while she was doing schoolwork, so I would go to my living room and play something with my friends. A few times she would walk into the living room to see what I was doing. And one night though, she stood by in the doorway while I was playing and told me that she needed to talk. I was playing with a headset and talking to my friends, so I didn't hear her at first until she repeated. I quit the game and asked what was going on, thinking maybe she needed help with something. When she started asking me who I was playing with and what I was playing, I named off the 3 guys. One of them she didn't know, so she immediately started berating me with all these questions about who he was. I tried explaining to her that it was the brother of one of my friends, but she didn't believe me. I had her put on the headset and had them say hello to her real quick, and I guess that satisfied her. But then she started bawling. She apologized, calling herself crazy and explaining how her ex cheated on her, so she had trust issues. It wasn't the first time that I've dealt with that, so I wasn't upset or anything. I just tried my best to assure her that I wouldn't do that. I told my friends and I was done for the night, and I ended up spending the rest of it with her, and she was fine. This, however, became a normal occurrence. I would get ready to go somewhere or do something, and if they didn't involve her, she always had something come up to make it to where I didn't go, or she would tag along. I used to have dinner Sunday nights at my mom's, and since my father died, my sister and I promised to make it a regular thing to do with her. No one else, just us 3. I took her with me once to meet them, and then she expected it every week. My mother didn't seem to be upset by it, but I could tell my sister was. I tried talking to Alyssa about it, saying that it was supposed to be a family thing and that she was always welcome to any other gathering we had. Well, she didn't like that. She was mad at me that Sunday, but when I came home, I brought her flowers and her favorite candy, and again, she seemed better. From then on, Sundays or the rare occasions us guys were able to hang out, something would come up. She'd say she wasn't feeling well and needed me to take her to ER. She would say that she needed my help with something that would normally take a few minutes and drag it out for hours. If none of these work, she would always go back to accusing me of cheating. This got to a point that I just gave up. I hardly went anywhere, and if I did, she was with me. Some people were allowed over, but not often. And somehow, we managed to go out to dinner with our mutual friends, which was a nice change. At one point, she had left to use the restroom and asked for my friend's girlfriend, Heather, to go with her. So, it was just us guys left at the table. And once they were out of sight, he had asked me how things were going with Alyssa. I played it off saying we were good, when he told me that Heather was thankful Alyssa had found someone because she didn't take her previous breakup too well. He said she started staying at home a lot, not going out, and started having a lot of suicidal thoughts. That was all news to me, because that was definitely not something that I had seen. I didn't mention it to him, but I was a bit concerned about us being home more. The rest of the night was fine afterwards, but that had just stuck in my mind. I tried being more understanding and involve her in more things, but it seemed like it only made things worse. When she would go places that had other women there, she was glued to my side and always had her arm or leg or head resting on me. Then, when we would go home, she would go right back to accusations. I couldn't keep up with the differences and told her that she either needed to learn to trust me more or we were going to need some time apart. She, of course, took this the wrong way. She ended up leaving that night and stayed at her apartment. I tried calling her to make sure that she was okay, but she never answered. I drove to her apartment and saw her neighbor outside saying that she had been gone all day, so I drove around to a few areas that I figured that she would be at, but I never found her. I ended up going back home to wait to see if she would contact me, and when I walk in the door, I see her sitting on my couch. I ask her what happened and where she was, and again, she was back to being cheerful. She said she wanted to call me but instead decided to wait on me to get home to surprise me. I was confused at what she meant by this, but that's when she dropped it on me. She said that she was pregnant and that she was dropping out of school so she could move in and spend more time with me. She said that this would prove to her that I was serious about her. I didn't know how to react at this that time. I hadn't even thought about having kids, and now here we are. And to drop out of school when she was so close to finishing was insane to me. There was a lot going on within that time and a lot to take in. And the next couple of weeks were a blur. She had me take her to get vitamins and other prenatal stuff. She was already talking about names and how we wanted to change the office to the nursery. My life was changing right before me, and I didn't know what to do. And sure enough, I was definitely home a lot more taking care of her. I finally had to tell my mom and sister since I had missed a few dinners. When my sister started questioning things, she had mentioned how this all started when we got into a fight that almost ended our relationship, and how it's held me back since then. She asked me if I had seen the test or went to any appointments with her, and I told her no. She told me to pay attention to things and to go to the next one. So I brought it up to her and she refused. She said that I couldn't go because men aren't allowed at that clinic, and then said because of the things they did that I couldn't be there. I wasn't a woman, so it all made sense to me, and I let it go. A few very long weeks later, I went to take out the trash from the cans in the bathroom and the bedroom, and I found some pretty compelling things. There were 2 tests in the can in the bathroom. I thought it was odd that they were there since it had already been a month, and I certainly had taken the trash out since then. So listening to my sister, I checked them. The tests were negative. Alyssa was sitting in the living room, so I had brought them out to her to question her. The fact that the color in her face left told me all I needed to know. I was confused and furious and asked why she would lie. She explained that she knew if she was, I would stay around more and she wouldn't have to worry about me leaving, but every time she checked, it was negative. But this time she said she felt it was wrong. She even admitted to tampering with our contraceptive items. I told her that I was done. I had tried too many times to help her, make her feel better about things, but this was too far. She had stolen the life that I had. I told her that we were done and that she needed to leave. Thankfully, she still had her apartment and just brought over some clothes. I slept on the couch that night, but the next morning, she tried to act like everything was fine, minus the fake pregnancy, and that we would get back together. This time I put my foot down. I couldn't keep at this. I helped her get the last of her stuff back to her place and gave her a hug. I told her that I knew she was a good person at heart and that she just needed some help. She asked if she got better and fixed herself if we could try again. I didn't want to make things worse, and I did care for her, so I agreed, which seemed to cheer her up some. And with that, I left. She still tried to call and text me on a regular basis, and I didn't really want to talk to her, but I almost felt obligated. So if I did respond, it was always short answers. But then she would try to make plans for us, and I would have to ignore her at that point or tell her that I was busy. But that also didn't stop her. She started getting mad because I wasn't spending time with her, so I ended up having to tell her that we are not a couple, that we are not together, and I have no intentions of being with you at this point in time. I told her that she needed to focus on herself and move on, and if it was too hard with me just being a friend in her life, then maybe we need to cut ties altogether. She lost it at that point. She screamed on the phone. She said things that I wouldn't repeat, so I told her that we were done and I hung up. However, me not responding to messages and phone calls wasn't enough to make her stop. She would call my mom and ask her about me, and my poor mom didn't know what to say, thinking we were just fighting, and would tell her that she would have me call her. She would show up at random places, conveniently, at the same parties that I would go to. She would be over at my friend's house saying that she was there to see Heather, but would immediately try to latch on to me so I would leave. I've seen her parked outside my work and outside my apartment. I work as a mechanic fixing big trucks and semis. So unless the truck belonged to you, there was no reason for customers to be there. Yet, she would show up and even go in and ask for me, so I would hide in the back and they would tell them that I wasn't there. She always begged them to let her stay and wait for me, but thankfully, they always told her no and that there was nowhere she could wait safely. But instead of just leaving though, one time she demanded to speak to me because she was having my kid and it was important. I did not tell my work about any of the pregnancy stuff, so they were pretty surprised when they heard that, and I was furious. I tried calling her to tell her that we needed to talk, but she didn't answer. However, by the time I got home, she was sitting there in her car. She got out smiling and I came unglued. I went off about her following me and showing up at my work. I told her that she had no right talking about the pregnancy to people at my work since it was fake. She claimed that she was actually pregnant this time. I told her to show me proof, and show me the test, and show me something from the doctors, anything to let me know if she was being honest. And again, her response was she just knew. I probably shouldn't have, or rather, I knew I shouldn't have, but I told her that she was crazy. I told her that I wanted her out of my life, and I never wanted to see her again. And without saying a word, she left, and I didn't hear from her for a few days. I thought it was finally over. Her friend, Heather, had tried contacting me, asking if I had heard from her, as she hadn't heard from her either. I told her what had happened and that we no longer spoke, but that was about it. The following Sunday, I went to my mom's for our normal dinner, and while I was over there, I got a text from her that said, "I loved you. It's all on you now." I ignored it at first, but it was starting to eat at me. So I left my mom's place early to try and talk to her. I called her, but she didn't answer. I went to her place and her car wasn't there. I caught her neighbors outside who said that she had left around 5 p.m., which was about the same time I left for my mom's. My only thought was that she went to my place to wait for me to talk or beg me to get back together because she still had a key to my place. I know it was stupid, but I didn't really think about it that time. And when I got home, I noticed my front door was unlocked and I heard music playing. It was the song she claimed was ours because we listened to it on our first date. The music was coming from the bathroom. I knocked on the door to ask her to come out so we could talk, but there was no response. I continued trying to talk to her for several minutes and I didn't get any response. So I pretended to leave, opening and shutting the door, and just sat in the living room waiting for her to come out or something. When she didn't, after 10 minutes or so, I went back to the door and told her that if she didn't come out, I was going to come in. I should have done it sooner. I opened the door to find her hanging from the built-in shower door. I had to try and hold her up as I was struggling to untie the sheet, and the rest of the night was a blur. The cops came and pronounced her dead, and there was an investigation, of course, to make sure that I wasn't a suspect. It felt like an eternity. I couldn't bring myself to go to her funeral as I felt like I was to blame, but I did bring flowers to her grave afterwards. I moved out of my apartment too, and I stayed at a friend's place till I found a new one because, who could stay there? It's something that still haunts me to this day, but I've also learned from it, and I take mental health a lot more seriously today. Just take care of yourself, and if friends or family say they have any feelings like that, get them help. It will affect more people than you think when you're gone.
I met Carter at a convention. Right off the bat, he scared me. I heard rumors that he'd nearly been removed from the extremely liberal convention, but he seemed nice enough and lonely, so I decided to befriend him instead. Then I noticed that he was always nearby. When I was walking to my hotel, he was there. When I was eating lunch, he was there. When I was in my private group, he waited outside the door. When I went to meetings, he was there too and sat beside me. He usually either walked up to me and started a conversation, which ended in an awkward silence, or just stared at me from 50 yards away. I couldn't believe he was really following me. So I went to my hotel, disguised myself, and went outside to see if he was there. He was, literally lurking in the trees nearby. He pressured me into giving him my number, so I gave him a fake one. He found my professional information and begged me to look over his work, to which I declined. He asked me if I'd be at a party. I lied and said no. He showed up anyway. Somehow he knew I'd decided to go. He always talked about how lonely and depressed he was, and how I was a lifeline, until, on my way home from the convention, I had no service during the flight. He freaked out and spammed 49 messages until ending with, "Okay, fine, I'm gonna end myself now, just so you know," strongly implying that it was my fault for not answering him immediately. I told him to call 911 and then blocked him. He contacted me through Instagram, Hangouts, email and more, but I never replied. I asked the convention security to speak with him about his creepy behavior, and I was told to just switch off my phone. Fast forward a few months, I get an email from James asking me to look over his work. Not a big deal. I run a program specifically for this sort of thing. I agreed since his email was very polite and well worded, but he seemed pushy in a way I couldn't quite figure out. I ignored it, reviewed his work, and ceased communication. You know where this is going. A little while later, he confessed that it was Carter all along. He put all the blame on me and apologized in a horribly manipulative way, begging me once again to review his work. I never replied, and here we are. James/Carter, let's never meet again.
I like to play a lot of MMO games, and I can get pretty competitive in them, so I've made some enemies, but also made quite a few friends. And after talking to some, I ended up meeting up with them, and we hung out to play games together, see a movie, and even went to some conventions together. This was pre-2020, and shamefully, I've even gone on a few regrettable dates that went nowhere. And this story is about one guy that just couldn't take no for an answer. A few years ago, I was heavily into playing a popular MMORPG. Sometimes, I like bringing smaller level people into places that they wouldn't normally be able to take on so they could get better rewards. I took a group of people, and after a few rounds, people were happy and thankful, some more than others, and I had one person stick around after the others had left, and he was talking to me, asking how certain crafts and skills work. Nothing unusual, and I was okay with helping him out. He added me as a friend, and we moved on from there. I had to work some longer shifts the next few nights, so I didn't play for a couple days. And when I finally got a night off, I decided to play some. Not long after logging in, this guy joined the same server and came over talking to me. He was excited to see me because he had managed to grind to the point that he was up to my level. I thought it was pretty impressive at that time because he was nearly half my level. And because of this, we ended up playing a new map together and took it out pretty quickly. It was pretty fun, and the guy was really funny. He had plenty of quips he would throw out, so it was amusing. We also talked a lot throughout playing about what we did for work, and I found out that he actually lived and worked at a warehouse about 2 cities over from me. And after playing, we've had to have stayed up for another hour just talking. We seemed to have a lot in common, so I was excited about it at that time. I ended up just giving him my email so we could talk more, and we really started to hit it off. Other than games, we had a lot of similar interest. For about a week, we emailed each other and then decided to video chat. He looked like a pretty normal guy, and definitely not someone that looked intimidating. After about a month of talking, we decided to meet up. It was all in public still, and we went to dinner, then to a local arcade, had ice cream, and then we parted. It was actually a great night. He seemed super nervous at first, but I figured it was just because he was shy. And we both agreed that we should get together again, and then we parted ways. At this point, we had traded our phone numbers as well, so we called and texted regularly, and I was feeling really good about this one. I was honestly excited to spend some more time with him, so we set up another date. But this time, it did not go as well. It started out fine. We got to the restaurant, sat down, and as I was holding the menu or going for a drink, he would reach out and grab my hand. It wasn't a big deal at first. I thought it was a sweet gesture, but as he continued, he would make it more and more difficult to pull away from. I know I ended up mentioning that his hands were cold or something to try to get him to stop, which deterred him for a bit. But as we ate though, he started saying things that were really off-putting. We started talking about our plans for the future, and I mentioned that I have been saving up money so that I could visit my brother who was living in Japan, and that I wanted to travel abroad. He seemed visibly surprised or upset by this at first, which I've seen people react like that before, so I tried explaining my reasoning, and he cut me off to say something like, "Well, it would be pretty difficult to travel like that with kids." I was confused by this comment because I certainly didn't have any kids, and as far as I knew, he didn't have any either. So I just laughed and mentioned, "I agree. Thankfully, I don't have any, so that would not be an issue for me." Without as much as a smirk, he said, "Well, not yet, but when we do, it wouldn't be doable." I first started reiterating that I didn't want kids and I wasn't planning on having any when it registered in my head that he said when we have kids. So I questioned him about it. He went on about how we were required to reproduce and that was what we were born to do. I was blown away by this because this was completely different from what we talked about prior. So, being friendly, I just told him that he can definitely have kids of his own someday, but I had bigger plans in life than to be tied down to a diaper bag. His reaction told me that that was not the right answer. He started going on about how it was all part of the plan, how we were destined to be together and have these genius kids that would save our country. I was in shock and incredibly disappointed as he came off as a great guy, but very quickly I knew that whatever was between us was now beaten, dead, and buried. So with that, I acted like I had a call to take and I walked off to gather my thoughts. After pacing in the restroom for a few, I went back out. I put money on the table for my meal and I told him that I had to go. He tried stopping me and asking me what was wrong and to stay longer, but I told him that I had an emergency, so I started walking out. By the time I got to my car, he was hollering for me, so I stopped for a second, thinking he may be just trying to say goodbye, or just maybe apologizing. But that was dumb of me. No, instead, he was saying he was sorry about what he said and rushing it, and that he could wait a few more months before we started having kids. At this point, I told him that I had to go, and I left as he watched me drive away. A little disappointed in the outcome, I ended up going back to work the next day and tried to find a way to let him know that I didn't want to see him anymore. And that night, I sent him a long email telling him that since we didn't really have mutual feelings and thoughts, that it was probably best to cut ties. It hadn't even been an hour when he tried calling me and I ignored the first one, but then he called again so I answered it. This guy was literally pleading and begging to not end it. I explained to him that his whole thing about the kids was way out of line and quite frankly creepy, and said that if he wanted kids, then I wasn't the person for him, as my mind was not going to change. And then he started crying on the phone, apologizing for his actions, and for a minute I believed him. Not to the point that I would try again, but that he seemed genuine. But he just kept making it worse. He then calmed down and said that if I would feel better about it first, then we could get married and then start having kids. At that point I told him that he really wasn't getting it. I don't want kids at all, and I don't want to marry him at all. And at this point, I don't want him in my life at all. I told him to stop calling and texting as I would not be answering anymore, and then I hung up. He tried calling many more times, but I just ignored him. However, since he kept texting me too, I ended up just blocking his number. However, that didn't help for long. This guy went through 2 more phone numbers within 2 weeks, and each time I just kept blocking it. But he was persistent. One day while I was at work, I worked at a department store. I got a call on my walkie that someone was asking for me by my name. I found this odd because I was a department manager, so customers didn't really see me. So there would be virtually no reason for one to ask for me. So as I head to the front, there he is. Creepy guy holding flowers, waiting for me. I hadn't told him where I worked, just that it was a retail store, so I have no idea how he figured it out. I asked what he was doing there, and again, he went on about being destined and babies and everything, and at that point, I had had enough. The kind and cool manager everyone knew at my work snapped, and I went off. I called the dude a freak. I told him to leave me alone and to get out of my life and never come back here, or I would call the cops. His response was to drop the flowers at my feet, said that I would change my mind, and then left. Thankfully, my staff was supportive and put up alerts in case he came back so that they knew to call the cops. And fortunately, that wasn't the last of him. I saw him in other random places like the grocery store, at the park where I jogged, and at a restaurant. And mind you, he lived a few cities over, so why would he be at some of the places by me? I did end up calling the cops and asking about a restraining order, but frustratingly, they said they couldn't really do anything unless he actually tried something. So on the brink of giving up, I changed my number, tried to limit who I told where I was going, and was pretty much non-existent in social media or other public forums I would go on. It only got worse though. On a particular hot day, I ended up helping some people out at my work in the lawn and garden section. So as soon as I got home, I decided to get food delivered and I would hop in the shower before it arrived. After I got out and I was brushing my hair, I heard a knock and then someone yell, "Hello?" I thought this was really odd and it startled me at first because I knew I didn't have any windows open because it was so hot. So I ran to the living room and I noticed a lady standing there, holding my food with the door wide open. And before I could say anything, she immediately apologized but said the door was open when she approached but didn't know what to do, so she just hollered. Nothing else seemed out of place or missing, so I just chalked it up to me not shutting it right. My house is old, and if you don't make sure to hold the doorknob a certain way, it won't latch and could swing open. So I just thought, being as tired as I was, that I didn't shut it right. I paid for my food, and the lady left, and I sat the food on the counter to start opening it, when I went to reach for a knife to cut the bag open. There was a knife missing. I looked around to see if I had used it and set it down somewhere, but my sink only had a coffee cup and spoon in it, and my dishwasher was empty. I didn't know what to do or what to think, so I just let it go for a moment, and I headed to the living room with my food. I noticed that my phone was pretty low, so I went to my room to grab my charger, and as I reached down to unplug it, that's when I found the missing knife under my bed. And that knife was being held by someone's hand. I was internally freaking out, thinking, how do I get out of this without letting them know that I was aware of their presence? So I grabbed my phone and I immediately called 911 as I walked out of my room, slowly. However, I pretended to call my work, and the conversation was something like this. 911, what's your emergency? Hey, Francis, can you do me a huge favor? It's very important. Ma'am, are you aware you called 911? Yes. Are you unable to talk? Yes. There's an envelope in my office with my address on it. 123, my address. Could you drop it in the mailbox for me? I forgot to, and it needs to be sent today. Do you need me to send someone to that address? Yes, please. They're on their way. I did not expect this to work, but I was beyond thankful it did, and that operator caught on quickly. I went out to the porch to wait, pretending to be doing something on my phone, all while watching inside for movement. When they finally arrived, they moved quickly into my house, and after a lot of yelling and commanding, the guy was finally dragged out. And to my horror, it was the same guy. I never told him where I lived, but I suppose, since he saw me so many times around town, that he must have followed me home one night. They also found zip ties and duct tape on him. And thankfully, that was enough to not only file that restraining order, but also was enough to press charges and put him in jail. And since then, I had my door replaced, and even so, I always make sure to lock it. I also rarely see people in person that I meet online. There are definitely good people in this world, but there are also people with bad intentions. Listen to your instincts though. It's usually not wrong. And also, never be afraid to call for help, even if you can't outwardly say it. Just listen carefully too, and they will understand. It can save a life. When I started high school, I feel I had some pretty close encounters due to my naivety. I'm a female and had very poor self-esteem, so while I did have some close friends, I was also quiet and reserved. However, as I was going into a new school, I wanted to put myself out there more. I wanted crazy memories with my friends. I wanted to try new things and maybe get my first boyfriend. So, in order to do this, I wanted to change myself so I could be happy with who I was. My birthday was over the summer, so I saved up as much money as I could and finally convinced my parents to let me dye my hair a deep purple and black, and even started doing some of those makeup tutorials. I know, it may sound stupid to some, but I know there were a lot of girls that felt the same way as me at that time. I know it sounds stupid now, but it really made a difference to me. I walked into that school for the first time feeling like a different person, except I was still the quiet, smart girl in the back. The first few months were not unusual. My friends and I hung out between classes. All four of us were able to dye our hair, so we had a bit of an ego boost, and we did have some people notice too. There was one girl in particular, Shelby, that was on the choir team that complimented my hair, which made me feel great because she was one of the more charismatic girls. She wasn't the mean and popular type because she was genuinely friendly with anyone, and she had a lot of friends, but she just never really talked to me except for in passing. That's where things started changing for me. While my friend and I were leaving PE, we were singing some stupid song when Shelby complimented me on my voice. She was in the same class so she could hear us. She said that I should try for choir next year, which I never would have thought about being the person I was. From there, she began talking to me more. I would help her on assignments in class, and she even brought in her makeup once to do mine before first period started. We started hanging out outside of school and became pretty close friends. Me hanging out with Shelby also meant that I was around more guys than just my brother and his friends. the ones she hung out around, started paying attention to me, and I didn't dislike it. It was different and something I wanted out of high school. One night, Shelby was staying over at my house and helping me dye my hair again. While we were waiting, we started messing around my laptop. She showed me her Facebook page and a few other sites she would go on, and showed me another website that I have never heard of before. To explain it the best that I can, it was supposed to be like a blog, targeted towards teenagers as a safe place to talk about concerns and fears. You could vent there or just share your creativity. It was all text-based, so you couldn't send or receive pictures. Shelby posted a lot of lyrics to her favorite songs or poems she wrote. She said there was a private message option, which was like an email, but still no media could be sent or received. She said she used this a lot since her parents monitored her email a lot. So, I followed and set up an account too. She helped me set up a personalized wallpaper and bio, and pretty quickly, I had a lot of supporters, which were like friends or followers, and I started using this daily. I would post music lyrics, poems, or songs that I wrote, little tidbits about my day and so forth. I even tried helping others that were not in a good state of mind when I could. It almost became like a job for me. That was a problem though, I do admit. I had been told by my teachers on a few occasions to put my phone away, and once had it taken away by a teacher. It was my English teacher. He was weird in a sense that he was always cheerful to talk to, especially when we first got into class. If you needed help with something or needed more time on a project, as long as it wasn't abused, he was willing to help. But if you interrupted him in even the slightest during lecture, he seemed to come unglued. He would slam his hand on the desk, do that ear-piercing whistle, things like that. And I unfortunately got caught on my phone, and he took it from me. I had to get it back from him at the end of the day, and I was more careful with having it out, especially in his class. And going back to the site, other than what it was intended for, some people use it to set up fights. It unfortunately was not blocked on the school's network, so when one larger fight took place, they were able to check the history under their logins and see the site. Because of this, the site was blocked from the school network, and the teachers were not very well aware of this too, and started monitoring harder for phones that were out. I was not a fighter, so I never used it for that, but I did on occasion have a few guys on there that I talked to and flirted with. There was even a new section on it where you can give people virtual hugs for points, which you earn for doing certain tasks, such as logging in, making a post, and things like that. The gifts can be left with a name or you can send it anonymously. I got a few from people I knew, but then I started getting ones weekly that were anonymous. I thought it was cool, and I showed my friends to gauge if they were doing it. They claimed they didn't, and were just as excited and curious as myself to know who it was. I figured if not them, maybe it was a mutual friend, or maybe I really did just have an admirer. So I made a post about it saying something about how I appreciate them. The next day, I got a response from a username that I wasn't familiar with, saying it was them and that they were happy I liked them. My friends didn't recognize their name either, so me being me, deduced it as someone who did actually like me. So from then on, they would reply to all my posts with a compliment on it, then would call me beautiful, gorgeous, and etc. I really didn't mind it for a while. I started getting private messages from the same person saying that I was perfect for them. I tried asking who they were, but all they would tell me was that they went to the same school but were too scared to approach me. I tried to convince them too, but they always refused. but the messages didn't stop. Hello, beautiful. Good morning, princess. I hope my goddess had a great day. I remember the messages like that because they kind of creep me out to this day, and I have troubles with hearing it now. This went on for a while, but it started getting old. That's all they ever did, so I started ignoring it. I don't think they liked that though, because they began to beg for me to acknowledge them, and they finally got that when the messages started becoming more explicit and vulgar, talking about my body and what they would do to me. I still didn't have a boyfriend, so I didn't even know how to react to that. So I just decided to block that person. After about a week or so, I started getting the same type of messages from a new name, so I immediately blocked it too. Thinking they may have gotten the hint, I moved on as normal. Towards the end of the semester, PE then had swimming classes, and since it was my last period for the day, sometimes I would just walk home in my swimsuit and cover up. By the time I had gotten home and showered, I had a message from a new person that specifically mentioned my swimsuit and something along the lines of how it was hard to resist not snatching me up from the name of my street. Now, this made me panic a bit because now I really am being followed and they know where I live. I just sent them a message saying to leave me alone, and then I blocked them again. They didn't stop. I can't tell you how many more this person made and how many more messages I would get where they just got worse and worse. They would describe what I was wearing or where I was when they saw me, or what they wanted to do to me, and even kept saying they were going to take me away and kept putting the date and counting down the days. April 17th. I hate that day now. There's always something there that makes me think that I need to watch my back on that day. This all started to crash down when we were in study hour, and Shelby asked me about going to her birthday party, and it was going to be the weekend of April 17th. I lost it. I felt horrible, but part of me thought it was her screwing with me this whole time, and I started yelling and crying. The teacher walked me to the counselor's room where I told her everything that was happening. My parents were called in, and they called the cops to have it all reported. They were so upset that I hadn't told them about it, but were more concerned about finding out who would do this to me. Since they thought it was a fellow student at first, and they knew the students had access to the site at school, they began trying to trace back the usernames that were messaging. So I had to go back in and unblock those names as well. And to my surprise, they were eventually able to find out who had created those and who was messaging me. It was our English teacher. This sick freak was messaging those explicit things to me, and after checking his computer, they found out that I wasn't the only one. He was definitely arrested, and he is in prison now. The website is gone too. It only got worse from there and ended up being shut down, thankfully. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Feeling like you have to look over your shoulder everywhere you go is just an awful way to live. And parents, no matter how much they may hate you for it, monitor what your kids do online. You have no idea some of the things that can and do happen right under your nose.
Just over a year ago, I split up with a very abusive ex-boyfriend, Kieran. He would be physically, verbally, and otherwise aggressive, and seemed constantly paranoid of being emasculated. This progressed to being paranoid about me even earning as much as him. I tried to be clear that I saw him as an equal, but it didn't matter. He fell further and further into the philosophy that women are the root of all evil. If ever there was a living, breathing caricature of genuine misogyny, he was it. I'm not a fighter, and he hated it. As he put it, the silence, the open void, hurts me more. He wanted me to fight back, but I never would. So, he would go to greater and greater lengths to assert dominance over me in one way or another. One incident was so extremely violent and calculated that I eventually reported it to the police, and with the help of an off-duty cop, due to the nature of the assault, it went straight to Crown Court, which is reserved for the worst offences in the UK. Nothing came of it. No eyewitnesses. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. I pressed it no further. I just wanted it marked up to help any future partners build a case that puts him away, if it ever happens again. This was the incident that tipped me towards making the decision to leave Kieran. It took some months, but I eventually did it. He made so many attempts to contact me that even the officers on my case raised an eyebrow. It was getting beyond borderline harassment. Long story short, this guy was not happy that he had lost me. He didn't care about my well-being. He cared about having me. I don't think I understand why to this day. Kieran kept vying for attention. He likes women of my political persuasion, and as I was known as an outspoken activist at the time, he began name-dropping my messages to other women in the same political circles. I thought that maybe he didn't think we knew each other at first, but then he started messaging friends. I tried to be cordial with all former partners, including him, so when he messaged me asking if another activist we followed was still online, I told him she was. Big mistake. Within the hour, she DM'd me. She received aggressive messages from him demanding photos and then demanding an explanation as to why she wouldn't oblige, because Kieran was my nice ex. I quickly told all other young female activists at my university in my hometown and my local party associations. Almost all came back to me saying they had indeed received messages from him. He was hounded off Twitter by a friend's boyfriend and deleted his account. I know how that feels, and I feel bad for it, but I don't regret the act of warning my friends, especially the more vulnerable ones. But then a new account was made. Kieran Mate 97. I only noticed because the first notification I remember getting the morning after was that this account had followed me. It had a photo of Kieran and a few sunny tweets shared by my fellow followers about how he was new to Twitter and wanted some friends. I spread the warning to some people and blocked the account, but before long there was another. I did the same and blocked them too. My mother started messaging me in confusion, sending me screenshots from her own Twitter. Kieran had found her anonymous account and was asking her about beans she had bought the other day. Knowing the things Kieran had said about her to me, and possibly others, she was upset and creeped out beyond compare. I advised she blocked him and he would tire himself out eventually. But there's one thing that I need to mention. One night I was messaging friends, having a nice night in with the housemates. Then my WhatsApp pinged. All of my family are on there, as well as a few busy activist groups, so I didn't think anything of it. Because of all the activist groups too, I wasn't alarmed that it was an unsaved number that had messaged me. It was probably a colleague. I opened the message. The only thing there was a dark photo of a house with an upstairs light on. I squinted to try and see if there was a joke in the photo. Why would someone send me this? I could see a figure in the window hunched over, something small in their hand. I could see the end of the terrace, the hedges, the shape of the gate, the pebble dash, the light car out front. It was my house. I forgot my merriment and messaged my friends. The conversation completely derailed, understandably. We scrambled to figure out who sent this to me, but by the time the second picture came in, I already knew. I didn't even look at it. Most of my uni friends at the time were competitive weightlifters, and they offered their house as safe refuge until I figured out what was happening. I sent a frantic, "What are you doing?" to Kieran, and he began typing immediately. He had been waiting. "Peeking," he replied. "It was a joke. Can you see that shadow? I'm not a bloody peeping Tom. I thought it was a joke when you first scared me crapless, but now I can't make sense of it. Oh no, that was just me actually watching my neighbor's shadow eating a pot noodle for entertainment, as if I'd come for you. You know how I think better than anyone. I examined the second picture closely. It wasn't mine. It looked very much like it. He hasn't messaged me since. No communication at all. I still don't understand what the purpose of that whole exercise was. I stayed in my house and left in the early afternoon for a friend's place the next day. For months afterwards, I was very careful about letting my landlady, neighbors, and friends know I was coming home. The doors and windows are always locked. I really don't know how he thinks. I hope I never see him again.
Stalker for over 10 years. This happened in the late 90s. I, Catherine, female and 43, and my friend Rose, female and 42, met him together. My stalker was a guy Rose and I met on the bus one day, coming home from my volunteer work after school as a candy striper at our local hospital. We were on the bus going home, laughing and talking, and this guy just randomly sits by us and starts talking. He tells us his name, and then we laugh thinking he said his name was Gay. Yeah, stupid teenage girls. He corrected us and said his name was Jay. We talked a bit more and innocently gave him our names, and he asked for my number, but I said no. He was like 7 years older, and kinda strange the more we talked to him. He got annoyed, but whatever, right? So we thought that was that. A few days later, maybe a week later, me and the same friend run into Jay while switching buses downtown. I was going to her house like I did a few times a week when we run into him. He asked for me to hang out and watch him play hockey that night. I said no, that I was going to my friends. And he got weirdly annoyed. He kept trying and bugging me, telling me about how much fun it would be and trying to get me away from my friend. He really didn't want her to come to this hockey game either. He just wanted it to be us. It was so weird. Our bus finally came, and we got out of there fast. Over the next few weeks, I kept running into him downtown. It was like he knew my schedule. Every time I tried to be nice, but get away as fast as I could. And every time, he would get annoyed because I wouldn't hang out with him. A few weeks passed by and I'm at school, and in walks Jay. I was so mad and frustrated that I snapped on him. Why was he here? And how did he know what school I went to? Did he follow me on the city bus? He tried saying that he was there to see his friends, but he wasn't with anyone. Just a 25-year-old guy wandering around a high school. And after that, I would randomly see him on my bus, and he would always try to sit across from me and watch. He would still ask for us to hang out, and I would still say no. As time went on, he would still find me on the bus and sit across from me, who I guessed was his girlfriend, or a girl he was trying to make me jealous with. He would look at me while making out with her. He would do everything he could to make me feel uncomfortable, but I would just turn up my music and do my best to ignore him or just move to another spot. But nothing ever seemed to deter him. He never did anything bad enough to call the police, but he knew it was wrong, and he knew it bothered me, and he knew that I would have a panic attack, and I'm sure he got off on that. As the years went on, I would see less and less of him. He would randomly pop up and make me uncomfortable. He started standing really close to me and trying to talk. I would have a panic attack and do my best to ignore him. I would still walk away and he would just get more pushy. Every time that I would run into him, I would text my friend that was there when we first ran into him and get her to calm me down. It's now 2023. So, 24 years since it all started. And I haven't seen him in the last maybe 8+ years. And I'm just praying that I never see him again. I'm 43, so he must be going on 50. And I'm still scared to run into him. I have thought that I saw him a few times and I panicked, but it wasn't him. I hope that I never see him again.
How this all began was me being nice to the people who come to my local community library. I was a casual worker, although people probably thought I was a part-timer, as not only was I spotted behind the desk checking in and out books, but also on my laptop abusing the Wi-Fi. This guy nicknamed Chesney was probably an influencer for the young adults, as he mainly skateboarded around and did whatever. He was never alone. I was a natural when it comes to customer service speaking and acting, so chances are I must have spoken to Chesney kindly enough he thought I was interested in him, or he became infatuated with me. I don't date anyone in or from my community. I explained to many people before that dating here would be full on Alabama. Chances are they could be my cousin through marriage or blood. It's disturbing as I'm Native American and can't even go west or south to date another guy, because chances are they might also be a long-distance cousin. While my time at the library was long, just to gain work experience, it did not last when Chesney asked me to hang out with him. I declined the first time, but it didn't stop. One day he asked for my phone number, and I refused. I don't give out personal information like that. I have a low friend count. I'm not close to anyone who isn't within my immediate family, and my family can see BS as soon as it comes into their line of sight. Chesney then asked my supervisor for my number to give to him. How I came to know this is by the end of the day when we were closing out the library. My supervisor tells me that she'll keep an eye on him and that I should get home safely. I continue every day as normal, very ignorant to the situation that was now starting to build. One day I was sitting in my cubbyhole, as the patrons like to call it, and I started to notice Chesney would find a spot to sit where I would be in his line of sight. I ignored this until one day he came up to my cubbyhole and hands me this Magic the Gathering card. He didn't say much, but I was disturbed. I'll be honest, something about him didn't seem right. The card had an octopus on it, and then, right then and there, I placed the card down and gather up my things and leave. I didn't return to the library for 3 months, maybe even longer than that. This had taken place 2 years ago. I told my eldest sister about the incident, and my family were worried. They wanted to know the guy's name. However, I did not want to know his name. I didn't see him being important to remember. I didn't see him again until a year later. I'm doing more casual work at the library and basically forgot his face until one day he comes in and was working at a computer. I never gave him a second thought. I was busy reorganizing and stacking the bookshelves. Then he printed off a paper and came up to me and asked, "How do you get a job here at the library?" My reply was blunt. "You'll have to speak with my supervisor." I overheard my supervisor telling him he couldn't hand him his resume here, that he needs to hand it in over at HR at the band office. Never saw him again, as I got a job elsewhere. 2 years later, about 4 days ago, I'm living my life as normal when my mum texts me. "Hey, some guy's calling you and would like to speak to you. Is there no number to call back?" Not my time. Didn't call my number. Not worth a call back, Mum. I just answered the phone. I said I'd just pass the message on. She gives me the caller ID, but like an arse, I text her back saying the ID isn't familiar and there's no number to call back from. If someone wanted to speak to me, they would call or text me through my cell. Otherwise, it can't be important. And I ignore it. I was sitting at my local Timmy's when my eldest sister calls me and tells me that I have a stalker. It shook me a bit, but another part of me was amused, since I do have a tendency to think dark thoughts, and that this could be a joke. My sister explained to me that my stalker wanted to meet with me and take me out to dinner, that he wanted to hang out with me. She wasn't saying this seriously, which is why I thought she was joking. I didn't know who this guy was, and I tried to place a name and face to whoever this person was. Things were starting to get a bit annoying when my mum and elder sister started to accuse me of giving out my brother's number to a stranger. Why the hell would I do that? I barely have a social life. Whose number would I be giving it out to? When I went home, I went over to my brother's house. My mum, who was staying there, said he just called. Now my family's on high alert. By reverse number searching, I got an address where the number was coming from. I wasn't taking this seriously. Whoever they are, they lived outside the res. Me and my elder sister went to the address and did a drive-by. My sister enlightened up the mood by making jokes, pointing out to random guys who were walking down the road saying, "Oh, that must be your stalker. No, that one." Just saying, these guys walking around the road looked like your typical druggie or tweakers. Once we returned home, my amusement ended, as the accusations started up again. If I gave out my brother's number, being the concern. My elder sister asked, and demanded to know, but of course I had not done that. "Then how did your stalker get it?" she asked. "Well, he either got it from someone who knows our brother's home phone number or looked it up in the phone book," is what I concluded, as I know for damn sure I never gave out anyone's number. Once I got home, I was annoyed, immediately grabbed my brother's handphone and went outside to call this guy. My sister was walking to my other brother, filling him in on what was going on. It didn't take long for the guy to pick up. You can guess who it was. Chesney. Chesney was the one calling my brother's home and asking for me. I immediately started to tell him my family isn't amused and that I wasn't interested. Even when I said no, he kept on trying to ask me out. So I asked for his full name, which he gave, and told my siblings who it was. It's not my fault for living under a rock. Turns out this guy's an addict, if not a loser, and I told my parents and they told me to not even think of dating him and to just go and leave him alone. Thanks, Mum and Dad. I don't date anyone from the res. I did do a Facebook search, and of course he had to be a wannabe thug, honest about doing hardcore drugs in his post, and I love that he has German blood, saying he's a Nazi and a descendant of the Führer. Nice. Getting up, I went to my brother's house who was home, annoyed, and I couldn't find the phone on the cradle. I asked my brother, who went to the incoming calls, pressed the number and handed it to me, which I immediately pressed call. And this guy didn't wait to pick up the phone. "Chesney?" "Speaking." I was pissed and didn't use my customer service voice. That was gone. "You will cease and desist from calling this number ever again, or I will get the police involved. This is a form of harassment." Okay. I hung up, furious. My mother said something about calling the cops, but he was calling my brother's phone, not mine directly, and he hadn't done anything threatening yet. But still, I really hope not to meet that guy again.
I'm a 17-year-old female working as a cashier at a popular thrift store. I've been there for approximately 8 months, and I love my job and my coworkers. A common thing that I've noticed is that unfortunately, anytime a new younger female cashier starts working, we've had quite a few since people quit or fall through, she will be hit on by plenty of older guys, and I was no exception to that. I've never had to deal with creepy or weird customers until this job, and I work in the food industry before, so maybe that's why. We, of course, get a handful of regulars, and while I've had a few creepy older guys hit on me before, One even looking me up on Facebook for my name tag and messaging me. There's a regular that comes in all the time. I want to say he's in his late 40s or something, and while he's always nice, my manager has pointed out his obsession with me. I was called in the office the other day so she could show me how he acts and such with the surveillance cameras. Just a list of what's been pointed out to me that I didn't really notice before. 1. He comes in at roughly the same time that I'm working every day, and apparently doesn't show up on my days off. I work closing most of the time, so he comes in around 6 p.m. 2. When he comes in, he will immediately look at the register I almost always work at and will do a double take looking for me. 3. He usually buys one bullshit item, spending about 15 minutes in the store usually. My manager has pointed out that he needs to buy something, or else he knows it will look weird. 4. Every time without fail, he will go to my register, and even when I was on the floor doing recovery, he asked me to check him out because I'm his favorite cashier. If there's a shorter line, it doesn't matter to him. He will stay at my register waiting and watching me. 5. He lingers around after buying something just to talk to me, showing me things on his phone, making sure there's no one else in line. And my manager said he approaches me when I'm alone so he can talk to me without holding up a line. 6. He commented on my hickeys that I failed to cover up before on my neck, making weird remarks here and there. He says he usually checks because there's always about 1 to 2. 7. He said I would look good as blonde, which isn't inherently weird, but paired with everything else, I guess. 8. When I wasn't wearing makeup, he would say something like, "You seem out of sorts recently." I've started wearing makeup again recently, and he's commented saying that he likes that I'm back to my old self. 9. I've noticed weird flirty remarks with him, but I've always brushed it off because customers are always kinda weird, and I deal with that often anyway. 10. He will lean over the register counter to talk to me closer, just his body language in general. And 11. He does a double take when he leaves too, keeping his eyes on me. These are just things that have been pointed out to me by my manager. She's like a protective mother with me, and says every time he comes in, she watches the cameras just to keep an eye on him. I watched the surveillance with her, and after all of that piled up, I'm starting to be more wary. For now, all we can do is just sit and watch. We have no reason to kick him out of the store or anything, and my general manager, being the dipshit that he is, wouldn't care anyway. It's just another customer to him. He wouldn't let me change my name tag after I told him about a customer looking me up on Facebook, saying it's policy, and in general making me feel like an idiot, like I'm overreacting. I'm opening tomorrow morning, so I doubt that I'll see him. He probably came in today, but I requested today off, so he's probably confused with my schedule right now. Well, I don't know. The donation guys and I are pretty close, at least with 3 of them, and I'm told to call them up front if he starts being weird. Kinda using a code phrase that's inconspicuous enough that the guy doesn't even realize. Thank you guys for following the story. I have more information, and here's what happened tonight. My stalker came around 1 p.m. today, an hour and a half before my shift started. Apparently, he bought one thing and asked if someone quit, because I wasn't there. And after buying the item, he walked out, then came back in a few minutes later. He walked around the store looking for something or someone, and then headed to the back. He looked around some more and went to the restroom. Our public restroom is in the employees only area, so it's not unusual. What is unusual is him coming back in and looking around. An hour before the store closed, he came in again. I freaked out because I wasn't expecting to see him. So I headed to the back, told my manager and also the donation attendants. The manager told everyone to go out on the floor, have a few pretend to be shoppers, and also keep watch. She kept watch in the office. I needed to stay at the register to get his phone number and to record our conversation. I'm 99% sure that he knew he was being watched. He actually tried to leave my line and get in the other cashiers, but since my manager was watching, she called her to the office before he got checked out. So, he checked out with me, talking as he usually does. But I'm sure he was uncomfortable since I was obviously anxious and we had a co-worker's girlfriend out front to take a picture of what he drives. I have 2 separate voice recordings. The first being him grabbing a cart and making small talk with me as he walks by the register, and next, me checking him out. The co-worker's girlfriend took a picture of his car and he parks in the parking lot of the store next door. I'm assuming to stay out of the camera's view, but I'm not really sure. She said that he circled the parking lot 4 times before leaving. Not really sure why. I went home and told my parents everything that's been going on, and I gave my dad his phone number to find information, and he found an address. He drove about an hour to get to the car and see go it lined up. Lo and behold, the cars he took pictures of matched what a co-worker's girlfriend saw. The one she saw earlier had a back license plate, no front one I'm assuming. We have his license plate now and even know his address. His address is actually about an hour away from my job, so I'm assuming he works nearby. Nothing pulled up on the sex offender registry with his name, but everyone's being watchful now. Latest update. I'm sorry for not updating on how everything turned out. I'm happy to say that he hasn't come in for the past few weeks now, and I hope I won't have to see him again. I would get really anxious when he came in. I would hide in the back, take my medication, and stay away from the register. I think he realized that we were watching him, so hopefully that's the end of that, and he's not in business or something. Thank you to everyone for all the great advice, and thank you for telling me your personal stories. I feel much safer at work now. This could have gone horribly wrong, but I was so happy his behavior was pointed out to me, so I could take precautions. If you are facing a similar situation, take all the necessary measures. Don't skip out on your safety, 'cause you never know what could happen. This literally just happened, so I'll try not to ramble too much. I work an evening shift, so I get home at about 10 p.m. most nights. Tonight, about 2.5 blocks from my house, I'm at a stop sign behind a big red truck who's turning left. It's late, we're on a 2-lane 20 miles per hour limit residential street. So when it takes the truck a long minute to turn with no cross traffic, I'm wondering, what the heck? But I don't really care. I'm not a fast driver or ever in any real hurry on the road. He creeps through his turn really, really slow. And now I'm more alert. And now he's out of the way enough. I see that he's going slow to watch the car in front. It's a little black car parked on the road and not on the curb. The passenger door is open and a guy is standing there yelling at somebody but couldn't see who. The car was on but the lights were off, so I assume they aren't driving and go around in a wide arc, slower than normal, but nowhere near as slow as the truck that turned. Half a block later, I see headlights behind me. They don't speed up on me or give any indication that anything is wrong. They stay about a half block behind me. I've got no more stop signs and a straight shot home, so I'm not even thinking about the car behind me. I turn the car off, open my door a crack, and shuffle around for my phone, my bag, and etc. But then, they freaking stopped in front of my driveway. I slam and lock my door fast, and then the passenger door opens and the same guy gets out. At this point, I'm debating whether to call my husband, who's inside but probably asleep, or maybe the police. And I settle on the police when the interior light turned on, and I see it's two not-so-small men looking my way. The one who got out said out loud for me to hear, "It's right here, man. The door just shut. I'm telling you, it's right here." He sounds drunk, and I've got 911 dialed and ready for as soon as he takes a single step closer. But instead, he gets back in the car, and they sit there a minute longer with the interior lights on, and I swear we locked eyes. I'm shaking. I can't figure out if I'm going to start crying or yell at them. And they zoom off way faster than they pulled up. I sit in the car for 6 whole minutes, waiting to see which way they go and to be sure that they left, which they did drive off all the way out of my sight, but back towards the way they came. Then I went in and I cried when I realized that they stopped a few feet short of where our security camera would have captured faces. This area is known for petty crime, vandalism, and bike thievery, not violence towards strangers. I don't want to drive anymore. I don't want to know what they wanted. Though, I do want some pepper spray on my keychain now. My name is Rebecca. My family and friends call me Becky for short. I will not use my last name for privacy reasons, but I am a pretty 21-year-old blonde female with a voluptuous figure. I have a habit of turning heads wherever I go, which is not always a good thing, because sometimes creepy guys follow me too. I go to a community college and I work in a diner as a waitress to make ends meet. Well, this all happened a few months ago. It was a very cold winter evening. I have a 5-minute walk from my bus stop to my apartment building. Usually there are plenty of people moving about, but this evening I was walking to my apartment alone, and I see a huge man walking towards me in the other direction. He wore a black mask over his head where you could just see his blue eyes, and he wore a black leather jacket. This guy was huge that it was intimidating, and I mean huge, 6 foot tall and built like a professional bodybuilder. I kept my head down as to not make eye contact as I wanted to walk quickly past him and back home again. I just had a 5-minute walk to my apartment building. If I walked fast, I could get there in no time. Unfortunately, things did not work out according to plan, because as soon as I walked past this huge man, I was painfully aware that he stopped and slowly started to follow me in my direction. Alarm bells of panic and goosebumps hit me, but I kept telling myself that I am overthinking. But just when I was thinking of outmaneuvering this hulk of a man, I felt my lights go out as I fell to the sidewalk unconscious. He hit me hard with those big hard fists of his, immediately knocking me out. And when I woke up, I found myself in a strange room. It looked like a child's dollhouse. What's worse, he dressed me as a little toy doll tied to a chair. I could see, but the room was dim with a swinging lantern light overhead. I saw that I could not even yell for help since all the walls were padded and soundproof to prevent such things. I was tied to a chair, true, but my mouth was free. Soon, I saw the door slowly open up and the muscle-bound man came in. He was still wearing a ski mask over his whole face and head, but he was wearing only bodybuilding posing trunks. I must say he did keep his incredibly muscle-bound body in tip-top shape. But this guy was a true psycho, stalking and kidnapping females and having them dress up like little toy dolls in a dollhouse for his kinky fetishes. He had a plate of chopped beef franks mixed with pork and beans as he fed me and talked. He talked about all the horrible acts he would do to me before he killed me. And when I asked him why he was doing this, he just looked at me and laughed. After I finished eating, he left the room saying he had to go to work first at his night job. What job he did not say, but when he came back, he told me that he was going to enjoy me. And what was disgusting is that he made me call him Daddy, which I did out of pure fear of the vile man. When the man closed the door and left, I started to panic. I didn't know what to do. Then I saw a telephone in the corner, and I decided to move my chair towards it. I reached it, and I pushed the receiver off with my nose as I dialed 911. I saw this kind of thing done in late-night movies a lot, but it did work for me here. The police dispatcher was very good at her job, and they managed to trace where I was being held captive, and got to me and freed me within 12 minutes. This stalker bodybuilding psycho's dollhouse dungeon was not far from my apartment building actually. When the psycho stalker got home from work, the police immediately arrested him. It was found out that this guy was a serial killer of young females who looked like his ex-girlfriend who left him for another man, similar to what the serial killer Ted Bundy was doing with the females he was killing. And by the way, he also worked nights as a security guard. Soon later, the police told me at the station house, where I was met by my parents, that this psycho stalker bodybuilder should be in jail for a very long time and may even get the death penalty for all the females that he had murdered. I was relieved to hear this. I was very lucky. I was the only female to escape this stalker. So, to this psycho bodybuilder stalker, let's not ever meet again.
I was accused of being a stalker. Did I do what I was accused of? Yes. But let me take you to how this started. I was home making dinner. The only 3 other people that were in the house were my 5-year-old son, his friend, and our foreign exchange student, Tina, who was 15 and extremely shy and didn't like talking because she didn't think she spoke English very well. I'm making dinner as I said and have my hands buried in a meatloaf and the phone rings. I wipe my hands and answer the phone and some lady's yelling at me. I can't understand her. She keeps yelling. And I got the words son, police, kick, ass. She hung up. And I was standing there with the phone in my mostly wiped hand, very confused. I resumed my meatloaf when the phone rang again. It was the same lady who was a little calmer and said, "Stop calling here. My son doesn't want anything to do with you. I already called the police." And I said, "You've been calling me. I didn't call you. I don't even know who you are." "The police will contact you and throw you in jail. I hope you rot in there." I didn't know what this lady was doing or where she was getting her information from. I was making dinner. My son was playing with a friend in the next room and Tina was studying. Later the same day, the police department called, asking if they could come over and speak with me. We set up a time and I'm almost in tears. Keep in mind I'm in my mid-30s and didn't even pull pranks when I was young. I was one who always followed the rules and taught my kids the same thing. And now I'm being accused of being a stalker? This may not seem scary, but I was terrified, thinking this lady is going to have me thrown in jail without so much as an explanation from me. Not that I had one. I was confused. 2 officers pull up and I open the door. They asked me to lock up my dogs as I had 3 Great Danes at the time, so I lock them up out back and come back to the door and tell them to come in. The kids were at the neighbor's house because I didn't want them to see me being arrested if it came to that. We sit at the kitchen table and I get them each a bottle of water with them asking about who lives here and where they are, and I'm sitting there shaking visibly. I'm so nervous, my mouth is dry and I can't swallow and I can barely speak. Just then my husband comes home. He's the one who can talk anyone calm and practically could sell oil to Saudi Arabia. He's so smooth. He's talking to the officers, and even though he wasn't here, he knows I'm not stalking anyone and that these accusations are ridiculous. They say the person said I called them and hung up. I said I was making a meatloaf and answered the phone with meatloaf residue on my hands, and some lady began yelling at me. And I only understood some police kick and ass, and she hung up. And then she called back, and I understood her better, and she said that I was going to jail and her son didn't want anything to do with me. And finally the officer says, "Well, I don't think you had anything to do with this, but she has your number, so someone called. Do you think your kids have anything to do with this?" I told him my little one was playing with a friend in the dining room, which I could see at all times, and my foreign exchange student was studying at the time, and she's quiet and there's no way she would stalk someone. Plus, I was right next to the phone. There was another phone in my bedroom and no one ever went there, so it couldn't have happened. They gave me the phone number I was supposed to have called and didn't recognize it. So they asked if they could speak to Tina, who was 15. She was shy, and I didn't really want to scare her, and they said they would just calmly speak to her, so I said okay. She came out, sat at the table with us, and they were asking her name, how she liked it there, and if she made any friends, and if she called any friends today. She said that she didn't, but then she said that she tried to call Jamie, but went over there instead but came back home because everyone was upset about someone stalking their son. We came to find out she plugged an old phone into the jack in her room, and it worked, so she called from there, and she hung up after 2 rings because she decided to walk over there since they live 4 houses away. My neighbors were getting calls from one of their son's ex-girlfriends, and Tina just happened to call at the same time, and they hit *69 and called my house thinking that I was the stalker. Now *69 was very new and I didn't know about it at the time. We had a huge laugh when the police called and told them that I was not the stalker. It was their neighbor, who they knew, and we were cool.
This happened yesterday after I finished the night shift at around 3 a.m. I work at a store of a big fast food chain to pay for my university. Our staff changes frequently because of a lot of students and migrants working at our place. So you don't get to know each other very well. Everybody has their own social life, and it is very, very rare for coworkers to establish friendships outside of working hours. But still, you know the people on your shift, and the night shift has particularly few workers. One of my co-workers, Jasir, started to get interested in me. Not that I noticed. I am young and dumb. I like being friendly, and which is something important for later, I have a hard time saying no. In December of 2019, our store threw a Christmas party at a pub. I went and I had a great time, but I also made plans for later that night. Because of that, I wanted to leave early, which made Jasir also want to leave early, despite the fact that he neither needed nor planned it beforehand, which made me so uncomfortable. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to get to the train station, and I did. So I couldn't say no, and I just let him tag along. When we arrived at the train station, it came to light that there was no train that he could take to get home. None. He did not check beforehand. He did not ask me, and he just wanted to tag along with me. I was super uncomfortable, and instead of taking the train to the main station, he got into my train and only got out when I insisted that he change his trains at another big station. In January 2020, Jasir asked me out for coffee and I agreed. I thought, he just wants to be friends. He doesn't have any and can only rely on his coworkers. If something happens, then I can just nope out. And so I went. First, it was okay-ish. We mostly talked about work-related stuff because we don't share any hobbies. We are not the same age and we don't have the same mother tongue. Jasir didn't like talking about work and nothing more. He started talking about how different I was from the other coworkers and how nice of a person I am and how good my charisma is. Then, he asked if we could get to know each other better. I genuinely didn't want to and still don't. Jasir is not my type, neither as a person nor from his looks, especially his looks. Even if I sound superficial, while I am in my early 20s, Jasir is at least in his early 30s. I have no problem with age gaps, which is a story for another subreddit, but I am not attracted to men that dress like teenagers. Instead of telling Jasir a straight no, I told him that I was not interested in having a boyfriend. He didn't take that seriously and told me that I would change my mind. I told him that I wouldn't, and he again was not really on board with that opinion. So I elaborated my opinion 3 times in German and 1 time in English to get it very clear. He always changes to English if he does not get something or thinks he misunderstood. And even though he heard it clearly, he just doesn't like it. I mean, obviously, my opinion is going to change if I explain it in English rather than in German. We left the conversation with him still not convinced, and me being really not interested in a second meeting. He quit soon after and I foolishly assumed that I was free. But whenever he came to my workplace to place an order, he would ask me out to eat something. And every time I would postpone whatever I said the last time. Maybe because of finals, because of travel, because of anything I could get my hands on. Then came COVID-19 that hit Germany in March, and I didn't see him anymore. I blocked him on social media in April, and I hope that that was the last thing to happen. But oh boy, that was not the case. Today, I finished my shift at 3 a.m. and left with my female and very Asian coworker Wei to catch the next train. We take different trains, so we decided to wait in the main lobby until I need to go to my platform. In that time, Jasir appeared. He just finished his shift and was on his way home. Wei asked him which train he needed to get, and he said that he was walking home. And while the conversation went on, I got closer to Wei to get some space between me and Jasir. Wei did not grasp how uncomfortable I was in this situation, and then she just walked away. What did Jasir do? He placed himself between me and Wei, right in my vision line, and every fiber in my body felt how he barged into my personal space. I decided that I could not take a private conversation with him, and I just said, "Oh, look, I need to get to my platform," so I could end it. But then Jasir followed me, through the main lobby, through the train station, and into the elevator, and into the train. I was internally screaming and walked through the train until I saw another passenger. I sat down in the row of seats next to me. And then Jasir followed. As if every bit of luck had just left me, the other passenger moved seats and went away, so I was back alone. Jasir talked and I showed clear signs of not wanting to continue the conversation. I hoped he would leave before the train departed, but he didn't. Mind you, the train goes in the opposite direction of his house and is 1 hour walking distance to my workplace. There is no way in hell this man could get anything out of taking that train except following me and continuing the conversation. I was freaked out and I told him in English that he was acting very weird. Maybe I should have used a different word, But English is also not my first language, and at that point, I only thought about escaping. I could not let him see my station, or he could easily find my home. I don't live rural, but at 3 a.m., there is nobody on the streets, so him following me home was terrifying. I thought about getting off a station earlier, but then I would need to get a cab, for which I did not have cash on me. Or I needed to walk the rest and he could still follow. I decided to get up at the next station, let him get out of the train first, and then just stay inside while the doors close. And it fortunately worked, but only after telling him clear that this was not my station. I would not get out and he would not get back in. I even held my hand out to stop him from coming back, and he stayed outside after the conductor shouted at us to let the door close. So let's rewind. He is way older than me, but does not get the concept of me not wanting to be in a relationship with him. Whenever he does not like an answer, he switches to English, because it just might be me misunderstanding. He followed me 2 times into my train and almost home, without ever thinking about how creepy that behavior is. So, Jasir, let's not meet again. Hi, I'm a 12-year-old female named Anna. I will not tell you my last name due to privacy reasons. And I live in New York City. I love to go to Coney Island Amusement Park in Brooklyn, New York, especially with my best friend Sally, who is really my only friend. One Saturday, I was walking through a large New York park on my way home when a man beckoned me to come to him. He was a stranger with a nicely trimmed white beard sitting on a park bench. He looked very Victorian-looking in dress, wearing a derby hat and black suit and spats of the period on his feet. This stranger looked nice, but strongly out of date in 2020 springtime New York. My mother told me to never talk to strangers, but he had a pleasant face and asked me nicely to come to him, so which I did. My mom told me to never speak to strangers, I said rather coldly to him, not really meaning to sound this hard to him. This strange dapper man looked me up and down and replied smiling. Smart mom you have, young lass, he continued. My name is Mortimer Johnson, and what's your name, sweetie, if I may ask? He said in his English-sounding voice, which was quite pleasant. It had a ring to it. I'm Anna, as I then gave him my last name. The stranger then laughed and said, You see, I know you, and you know me. We're not strangers anymore. I then looked at him and said, Knowing each other's name is not knowing, I said quickly. You are correct, my fine young lass, he answered me, still smiling. I then looked at him and smiled back and thought, if this guy is Chester the molester, he is sure a pretty nice guy so far. The stranger then looked me up and down as he continued smiling at me. As then, I started to really think that he may actually be Chester the molester. I bet you are not satisfied with your appearance or life, he said concerned. What do you know about my life? I asked more polite this time. I see things, my young lass. You are on the plump side, and many mean girls make fun of your appearance. Except your pal Sally, of course, and your dear old widowed mother is having trouble in paying the rent, he continued. Am I right about any of this? He asked me as I nodded my head. But how do you know all about me, sir? I asked in my sweet voice. I see things, girl, and I want to help people like you, he replied, smiling. Mortimer Johnson then took from his pocket a shiny gold coin that was actually larger than a silver dollar. He then handed it to me. Take this coin, lassie. You have 2 big wishes, but only 2. Choose wisely with them. I will be watching you from afar. He spoke. The choices you make in life are up to you, but these 2 wishes, when you flip the coin once, can make your life a whole lot better and easier, he said. But why give me this coin for 2 wishes? I asked. The stranger then put a hand gently on the side of my right cheek. I told you, young lady, I like to help people like you, he said. And before I could ask another question, the man got up from his bench and got on the bus that just stopped. Remember, honey, you only get 2 wishes with your coin. Make your choices wisely, he said happily as the bus took off down the New York street. I then looked down at my big old coin. I just get 2 big flips and 2 big wishes, and that's all. Well, it's better than nothing, I thought to myself. I then looked at the bus till it disappeared down the street. The next day, Sunday, I showed Sally my gold coin and about my day with a stranger named Mortimer Johnson. Sally was a good friend, but she did not believe a word of it and then started to laugh. But it was a pleasant laughter, and it wasn't mean at all, and it made me laugh too. Have you made any wishes yet? She then asked seriously to me. No, Sally, not yet, I replied, but I knew I would soon. That night alone in my room, I made a wish that my mom would get a higher paying job and make our lives easier in our New York apartment, as I gave the big gold coin a flip. Then, I decided to make another wish and wish that I could lose all my 12-year-old fat and then blossom into a lovely young girl, as I quickly gave the gold coin another flip. When I did this, I did not feel any different, nor did the coin glow in my hand after each flip. I almost decided to throw the coin out of the window, but decided to hold on to it and maybe spend it later. I wasn't really sure yet. The next year though, in 2021, things started to happen. My life and my mother's life started to change for the better. My mom got a good business job in the center of New York and could make ends meet for the both of us. And through exercise, I lost all my baby fat, and not only that, I blossomed very happily into a blonde, beautiful 13-year-old girl with a large bosom and curvaceous figure. I even noticed quite a few boys giving me excited looks that they thought I was good looking as well. My friend Sally, who was a true friend, was not jealous at all now that I was a beautiful teen girl with no money problems, which I was thankful for. And one Sunday, I was flying my kite and saw Mortimer Johnson walking up to me. I thanked him greatly because the 2 big wishes from the gold coin did come true for me. And number 1, my mom got out of money problems. And number 2, I lost all my plumpness and then blossomed into quite the beauty. Mortimer just smiled at this and said that he was watching me from afar. He then told me that we could become good friends if I wanted to be. Friendlier than we were now with each other, as he then laid his hand around my waist and started to pull me close for a kiss. I then pulled away from him and ran away. Stupidly, I did not call the police right away, but did manage to point him out in the park when he was looking the other way when I was with my mother. Once my mom looked at him, she turned as white as a ghost and told me that that man was a child molester named George Thompson, not Mortimer Johnson like he said. She told me that I was lucky to escape with my life since this man murdered a few kids already. Plus, the gold coin story was all a lie to get me to like him better so he could be friends with me and later on molest me and probably murder me once he gained my trust. My mother went on to say that the gold coin was actually a fake coin from Coney Island amusement park to fool young children who didn't know any better like myself, who fell for it. Sadly, some kids with their very lives. My mom then quickly called the police and had George Thompson, the child pedophile and stalker, arrested. I was very lucky to have a smart mother like this. I guess the gold coin did give me one more lucky wish in having this predator and stalker arrested, hopefully for a very long time, so he could no longer prey on young children. I can cut the intro to this short by saying that my parents were busy looking over my sick sister when I was young. I got social media around the time when I was 9 and often wasn't wearing enough clothes during videos, and I wasn't monitored. I was always looking for more attention, and when my account didn't take off, the next thing I asked for was to download a live stream app. This particular app, if you provided your location, it would show in the corner of the screen for the viewers. So anyone who watched my stream knew the name of my town and my country. And I often wore my school uniform in videos too, because I wasn't really educated on internet safety. A few people came over for my account, but a stranger took interest in my life and started watching my videos. One thing led to another, and I was being groomed by this man. Over the months that this occurred, I only saw his face once, but it kind of made everything clear to me, and I ghosted him completely. I didn't touch any technology for nearly a year, and I didn't tell my parents until the next year. And when I say groomed, I mean emotionally manipulated into sending explicit pictures, which he then used to blackmail me into sending more. You know, the classic 2000s child predatory stuff. Around the time that I ghosted him, an old white car would show up on my walk home, which is actually me walking to a friend's house. Let's call it Anne's house, which he may have thought was mine. The windows were tinted and the plates were messed up that you couldn't make out more than 2 letters. The car would be there every single afternoon, parked near the curb, and it would then start as we reached the crossing, speeding at us and nearly hitting Anne on a few occasions, but mostly I was the target. The car even followed us to her house one day with the driver's window halfway down. I got a look at the driver's face and it was 100% the man that I have been talking to online. At this point, my parents weren't even aware of the grooming, but I confided in Anne, who threw a brick at the car, something that I do not condone, so I told her off for it multiple times. The car was always around for most of my 4th and 6th year until I went to high school. We moved houses nearly 2 years ago, and we've had a lot of new neighbors moving in as the young couples who built the houses around us moved out. I was talking to one of our new neighbors this morning as our paths crossed on our morning walk. She's an older woman, maybe in her 60s, and for her privacy, we'll call her Deb. Deb is an absolute sweetheart, and she was telling me about her grandkids visit all the time, and that there would be plenty of chances for me to babysit or help with the garden for money, seeing as her and her husband are old. We got busy talking, and I walked her home, seeing as it's just down the road from me anyway. She asked if I wanted to run home and asked my parents if I could come in for coffee and some banana bread, but I immediately refused when I saw the car. It was the same old Toyota Camry with the tinted windows. It was the one with the messed up license plate and the dent on the driver's side door from the day that I told my friend, and she pegged a brick at it. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.